The city streets pulsed with life as the sun dipped below the skyscrapers, casting long shadows across the crowded sidewalks. Jack Harris navigated through the throngs of people, his eyes scanning the faces for a glimpse of familiarity. It was a habit he'd developed over the years, ever since the night his ambition had consumed him, leading him down a path of destruction. He'd lost everything: his job, his friends, and his reputation. The weight of his mistakes still lingered, a constant reminder of the man he used to be. As he turned a corner, he collided with a stranger, spilling the contents of her purse onto the sidewalk. Apologetic, Jack bent down to help her gather the scattered items. The woman's eyes met his, and for a moment, they just stared at each other. There was something about her that seemed out of place in this city of strangers. She was different, with an air of quiet determination that intrigued him. "I'm so sorry," Jack said, handing her a crumpled receipt. "I'm usually more careful." The woman smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "It's okay. I'm just glad I ran into you." Her name was Sarah, and as they stood up, Jack felt a spark of connection he hadn't experienced in years. Sarah's eyes seemed to bore into his soul, as if she could see the depths of his regret. "I'm looking for someone," she said, her voice low and urgent. "A man named Victor. He's been missing for weeks, and I think he's in trouble." Jack's instincts told him to walk away, to leave the past buried. But there was something about Sarah's desperation that resonated with him. He agreed to help her, and together, they set out into the night, navigating the city's underbelly in search of Victor. As they delved deeper into the city's shadows, Jack's unease grew. He'd thought he'd left this world behind, but the familiar sights and sounds were like a siren's call, drawing him back in. They visited seedy bars and rundown hotels, asking questions and gathering clues. With each step, Jack felt himself being pulled back into the vortex of his past. He'd always been driven by ambition, willing to do whatever it took to succeed. But that obsession had consumed him, leading him down a path of destruction. He'd hurt people, ruined lives, and destroyed relationships. The memories still haunted him, a constant reminder of the man he used to be. As the night wore on, they finally tracked Victor to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Jack's heart was racing as they approached the entrance, the sound of footsteps echoing through the deserted streets. He knew that feeling, the rush of adrenaline that came with taking risks. But this time, it was different. This time, he was doing it for someone else, not just for himself. As they entered the warehouse, Jack's eyes adjusted to the dim light, and he saw Victor, bound and gagged, a look of terror in his eyes. But they weren't alone. A figure emerged from the shadows, his eyes gleaming with a manic intensity. Jack recognized the look, the same look he'd seen in his own mirror years ago. It was the look of obsession, of a man consumed by his own ambition. The stranger's name was Marcus, and he'd been using Victor to further his own interests. Jack felt a surge of anger, but it was tempered by a sense of recognition. He knew what it was like to be driven by obsession, to lose sight of everything else. As Marcus sneered at them, Jack felt a sense of calm wash over him. He knew that he couldn't change the past, but he could change the present. He could choose a different path, one that didn't involve hurting others or sacrificing his own humanity. With a newfound sense of purpose, Jack stood up to Marcus, refusing to back down. The confrontation was tense, the air thick with anticipation. But in the end, it was Jack who walked away, Victor by his side, leaving Marcus to his own devices. As they emerged from the warehouse, the city lights twinkling like stars, Jack felt a sense of redemption wash over him. He'd faced his demons, and he'd come out on top. He knew that he still had a long way to go. But for the first time in years, he felt a sense of hope. He turned to Sarah, who was watching him with a look of admiration. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack smiled, feeling a sense of peace settle over him. I'm just glad I could help." As they walked away from the warehouse, Jack knew that he'd finally found a new path. One that didn't involve ambition or obsession. He'd found a path that involved helping others. And in doing so, he'd found a sense of redemption.